Nazi Germany, which launched World War II, also initiated and perpetrated the Holocaust. After 5.5 years of bloodshed and destruction, Germany was defeated. Since then, Germany has undergone a complex process of coming to terms with its actions before and during the war, and with its special historic responsibilities. German leaders have expressed their nation's commitment to ensuring that the legacy of the Shoah remains forever a crucial aspect of Germany's identity. It is my honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Frank-Walter Steinmeier, President of the Federal Republic of Germany, to deliver his remarks.
Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu Melech Haolam, שהחלנו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. זו מתנה ומעשה של חסד.
It is a gift and a gift of mercy to be able to address you here at Yad Vashem on this day. The Excellency, Professor President Rivlin, and Dr. Moshe Kantor, thank you for your invitation.
Excellencies, guests from all over the world, and most of all, esteemed witnesses and survivors of the Shoah. Here at Yad Vashem burns the eternal flame in remembrance of the victims of the Shoah. This place reminds us of their suffering, the suffering of millions, and it reminds us of their lives, each individual life. This place remembers Samuel Titelmann, a keen swimmer who won competitions for Maccabi Warsaw, and his little sister Riga, who helped her mother prepare the family meal for Thabas. This place remembers Ida Goldish and her 3-year-old son, Willy. In October, they were deported from Chisinau ghetto, and in January, in the bitter cold, Ida wrote her last letter to her parents. I quote, "I regret from the very depths of my soul that on departing, I did not realize the importance of the moment, that I did not hug you tightly, never releasing you from my arms." Germans deported them. Germans burned numbers on their forearms. Germans tried to dehumanize them, to reduce them to numbers, to erase all memory of them in the extermination camps. They did not succeed. Samuel and Riga, Ida and Willy were human beings, and as human beings, they live on in our memory. Yad Vashem gives them, as it says in the book of Isaiah, a monument and a name. I too stand before this monument as a human being and as a German. I stand before their monument, I read their names, I hear their stories, and I bow in deepest sorrow. Samuel and Riga, Ida and Willy were human beings. And this also must be said here, the perpetrators were human beings, they were Germans, those who murdered, those who planned and helped in the murdering, and the many who silently towed the line, they were Germans. The industrial mass murder of 6 million Jews, the worst crime in the history of humanity, it was committed by my countrymen. The terrible war, which cost far more than 50 million lives, is originated from my country. 75 years later, after the liberation of Auschwitz, I stand before you all as President of Germany, and I stand here laden with the heavy historical burden of guilt. Yet, at the same time, my heart is filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the hands of the survivors stretched out to us. Gratitude for the new trust given to us by people in Israel and across the world. Gratitude for Jewish life is flourishing again in Germany. My soul is moved by this spirit of reconciliation, a spirit which opened up a new and peaceful path for Germany and Israel, for Germany, Europe, and the countries of the world. The eternal flame at Yad Vashem does not go out. Germany's responsibility does not expire. We want to live up to our responsibility. By this, dear friends, you should measure us. I stand before you grateful for this miracle of reconciliation, and I wish I could say that our remembrance has made us immune to evil. Yes, we Germans remember, but sometimes it seems as though we understand the past better than the present. The spirits of evil are emerging in a new guise, presenting their anti-Semitic, racist, authoritarian thinking as an answer for the future, a new solution to the problems of our age. And I wish I could say that we Germans have learned from history once and for all. But I cannot say that when hatred is spreading. I cannot say that when Jewish children are spat on in the schoolyard. I cannot say that when crude anti-Semitism is cloaked in supposed criticism of Israeli policy. And I cannot say that, ladies and gentlemen, when only a thick wooden door prevents a right-wing terrorist from causing a massacre, a bloodbath in a synagogue in the city of Halle on Yom Kippur. Of course, our age is a different age. The words are not the same. The perpetrators are not the same. But it is the same evil. And there remains only one answer. Never again, nie wieder. That is why there cannot be an end to remembrance. This responsibility was woven into the very fabric of the Federal Republic of Germany from day one. But it tests us here and now. This Germany will only live up to itself if it lives up to its historical responsibility. We fight anti-Semitism. We resist to the poison that is nationalism. We protect Jewish life. We stand with Israel. And here in Yad Vashem, I renew this promise before the eyes of the world. And I know that we are not alone. Today we join together to say no to anti-Semitism, no to hatred. From the horror of Auschwitz, the world learned lessons once before. The nations of the world built an order of peace founded upon human rights and international law. We Germans are committed to this order, and we want to defend it with all of you, because this we know: peace can be destroyed and people can be corrupted. Esteemed heads of state and government, I am grateful that together we make this commitment today: a world that remembers the Holocaust, a world without genocide. Who knows? Who knows if we will ever hear again the magical sound of life? Who knows if we can weave ourselves into eternity? Who knows? Salman Gradowski wrote these lines in Auschwitz and buried them in a tin can under the crematorium. Here at Yad Vashem, they are woven into eternity. Salman Gradowski, Samuel and Rega Tittelmann, Ida and Willy Goldisch, and so many others. They were all murdered. Their lives were lost to unfettered hatred, but our remembrance of them will defeat the abyss, and our action will defeat hatred. Ladies and gentlemen, by this I stand, for this I hope. Baruch atah Adonai, shechayanu bekimanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh.
Blessed be the God that we have reached and enabled us to be here.
A very solemn day of remembrance and a solemn address there by President Steinmeier. With me in the studio is DW's correspondent Kate Brady, and in Jerusalem is our correspondent Peter Hill. And I want to go to Jerusalem first, if I may. Peter, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier in Yad Vashem, the first time that a German leader has given an address. How was his speech received?
The reactions I've heard so far were very positive. I think that Steinmeier found the right words here in Yad Vashem at the ceremony today, commemorating 75 years since the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp. He recited a Jewish blessing, and I spoke to one of the Holocaust survivors, a German Holocaust survivor, who were present here today, and he told me that he was very moved, that he was almost moved to tears by this German president, the president of the people that he felt he still belonged to, but that had perpetrated these crimes that one can't even imagine in their scope, that almost moved him to tears. So I think Steinmeier found the right words here, talking about German guilt, as we just heard, a guilt and a responsibility that will never go away. That was also something I think that people here in Israel wanted to hear. And then, of course, as a third point, talking about anti-Semitism in Germany today, what Steinmeier did, talking about his shame that's again in Germany we see anti-Semitism. We saw the attack on a synagogue in Halle last October, and Steinmeier spoke about that and about his will to fight that in Germany.
All right, Peter, want to go now to Kate. I want to put that same question that I put to Peter. This is a historic speech by any measure. How has it been received here in Germany? Are Germans following these ceremonies?
It certainly has been well received, and today's ceremony was just one of several events and memorial services that are taking place over the next few days ahead of International Holocaust Memorial Day on January 27th. I think that said, though, it is worth pointing out that many Germans aren't, in fact, aware of this ceremony taking place today in Israel. That said, what they are very much aware of right now is a much bigger situation going on in Germany. It's very much a time of reckoning in Germany right now, in which the country is no longer only dealing with its past, with its Nazi history, but also with its present and its future. And we heard that from Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the German president, as well today, when he said he wished that he could stand there today in Israel and say that Germany had learnt from all of the lessons from history, but that is simply not the case. So there are some big questions that German society and German politics is asking itself right now. Exactly, Kate, because there were many poignant points in his address, but one of the ones that I would like us to take a listen to is when President Frank-Walter Steinmeier underscored Germany's responsibility to combat anti-Semitism. Let's take a listen to an excerpt from his speech, and we'll pick up our conversation after that.
The eternal flame at Yad Vashem does not go out. Germany's responsibility does not expire. We want to live up to our responsibility. By this, dear friends, you should measure us.
Kate, that is so poignant, because this country has seen some very troubling incidents of anti-Semitism this past year. If you were to grade German authorities in terms of how are they doing when it comes to fighting modern-day anti-Semitism? There certainly has been an increase in action towards fighting anti-Semitism, and as you say, that has largely been fueled as well by the rising reports of anti-Semitic crimes within the last few years. And of course, we'll remember as well the attack in Halle, in the eastern German city of Halle, in October on a synagogue as well, on Yom Kippur. That said, there is still a lot of work to be done in Germany when it comes to tackling anti-Semitism and any kind of racial hate. For a long time here in Germany, and even now we still hear that phrase, nie wieder, never again, is the phrase that was always used in German society when it came to talking about Holocaust and talking about how Germany can tackle anti-Semitism today. And I think for a long time there was also a lack of understanding that by saying that, and if you say it loud enough and say it often enough, then that means that we can eradicate anti-Semitism. And that simply wasn't and isn't the case. And so there still is a lot of work to be done to tackle anti-Semitism and any kind of racial hatred in Germany. All right, Peter, I want to go back to you in Jerusalem. A solemn commemoration, remembering the Holocaust, fighting anti-Semitism, but it also took a political turn. Let's take a listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and we'll go to you in Jerusalem.
I'm concerned that we have yet to see a unified and resolute stance against the most anti-Semitic regime on the planet. A regime that openly seeks to develop nuclear weapons and annihilate the one and only Jewish state. Israel salutes President Trump and Vice President Pence for confronting the tyrants of Tehran. I call on all governments to join the vital effort of confronting Iran.
Peter, I think it's fair to say that Iran also played a very key theme on this day.
Yes, absolutely. Not only Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, talked about Iran today. Also Mike Pence, the American vice president, mentioned Iran in his speech. And I think it is, for Netanyahu, it is on top of his foreign policy agenda, of course. He sees Iran as the main threat to Israel's existence. And that's why he mentioned Iran here at this forum today, because he says if we want to prevent another Holocaust, another try at killing all Jews in the world, then we must prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, from building a nuclear bomb. And that is why he really pushed for that, not only today at his speech, but also before his speech in bilateral meetings he had with Putin of Russia and with Macron of France. So that was really one of the main points, I would say, even in his speech, the threat of Iran. And there's, of course, some division among those world leaders that came to Yad Vashem here today in that question, because for most of the European leaders, Iran is, of course, seen as a threat, but they think that negotiations with Iran will lead to a peaceful solution. And if you listen to Netanyahu, of course, he is for more pressure, for sanctions in order to topple or in order to get rid of the regime in Tehran.
Now, Kate, back to you here in the studio. Dozens of world leaders were in Jerusalem rallying against anti-Semitism. Notable and conspicuous by absence was Poland, of course. The country was occupied by Germany. Auschwitz was a death camp run by Germans, by Nazis in Poland. Why did Poland not send somebody to attend the ceremonies?
Well, this is due to an ongoing feud between Poland and Russia at the moment. So the Polish president refused to attend because Russian President Vladimir Putin was actually given a slot to speak at today's ceremony. Now, the countries are currently locked in a feud or a disagreement over how the Second World War began in 1939, and particularly when it comes to the Soviet Union's non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany back in the 1930s. So in recent months, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he's made some rather interesting comments, playing down parts of the Soviet Union's role in the beginning of the Second World War, such as attacking Poland from the east in 1939, while Germany was coming in from the west, for example. But the Polish president will indeed be attending the ceremony on Monday, which will be taking place at the site of the Auschwitz death camp in Poland. So he will be attending a memorial early next week.
All right. And Peter, just very briefly, do you have a reaction? Has there been any reaction to the Polish leader or Poland not sending anybody?
Yeah, of course, there was that thing was like a shadow hanging over this whole ceremony today. I think it was on many people's minds that the Polish President Duda wasn't attending here today. And of course, this row, it overshadowed this event, an event that was meant to be commemorating the Holocaust and uniting countries in the fight against anti-Semitism. And so I think at the end of the day, at least during the speeches today that we heard at Yad Vashem, President Putin of Russia didn't make any more of these remarks that Kate just talked about. So at least in that respect, it was a ceremony worthy of a ceremony. But also today there was some criticism of Putin talking about numbers of Jews being murdered in Soviet territory. Some people here said he had been overstating these numbers. And so, again, what was meant to be just a commemoration also turned into some sort of diplomatic conflict, into some sort of feud over history. And I think President Rivlin of Israel had an interesting remark to make about that. He said, leave history to the historians.
Peter Hiller reporting from Jerusalem, and with me here in the studio providing analysis, DW's Kate Brady. Thank you both.